Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's Roundtable, Ethical Use of Artificial Intelligence. Bienvenidos a todos a nuestra mesa redonda de hoy. Today's program will be in English, and we have interpretation to Spanish and Portuguese available. This conversation is on the record, and we are recording it to be published on our website. When we open the floor for questions, please raise your hand virtually, unmute yourself, and turn on your cameras. This program is part of our digital and data governance series. The increasing adoption and application of emerging technologies in the Americas have generated numerous opportunities and challenges, transforming industries and societies across the region. In response to these advancements, America Society Council of the Americas convenes key stakeholders from a wide range of sectors and at the forefront of technological developments to collaboratively define a path forward that ensures the responsible integration of emerging technologies such as AI and the implementation of data governance and regulatory measures within the region. This concerted effort aims to leverage the benefits of these technologies while proactively minimizing potential risks. I want to thank the sponsors of the series, Apple, Portafolio Inmobiliario, and Salesforce. I want to thank Salesforce in particular for leading this roundtable. Alejandro, it is always a pleasure to work with you and your team. Artificial intelligence is and will take a leading role in our lives and in the world. Today, we will have a forward-looking and insightful discussion about ethics and AI. Our goal is to discuss how we can move forward together to advance the ethical AI agenda in the region. We have teams joining us from all over the region: Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, and Uruguay. It is fabulous to have this virtual roundtable with representatives from both the private and public sector. To start the conversation, I want to introduce Ángel Melguizo, founder of Argia and advisor to UNESCO, and Rachel Gillum, Vice President of Ethical and Inclusive Product, Office of Ethical and Humane Use at Salesforce. Ángel, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and it's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the Council of the Americas. Thank you to Salesforce who are promoting and fostering this conversation of probably one of the key topics of our lifetimes in terms of the digital revolution. As economists, as people, I mean, I think nothing is changing our lives so much as artificial intelligence on how we move in our cities, how we study, how we work, how we apply for a credit, or even how we pay taxes, or even the politics. This is been even compared to the development of the printing press 6 centuries ago. So it's not just the digital revolution of our times, but probably of many generations, the generations to come. Robert Solow, one of the economy novels in history, said back in the days that he did see computers everywhere except in statistics. I think we are seeing AI everywhere, but also in the statistics, checking market capitalization of big companies related to AI. I mean, just adding the capitalization of the 3 chip makers is equal to 1 Microsoft, just what the companies producing chips. And NVIDIA, one of the world leader on chips capitalization, is equivalent to 5 Walmarts. It's equivalent to 5 Teslas. It's equivalent to 10 Bank of Americas, and it's equivalent to 20 AT&Ts. So just to compare producing chips for this amazing technology versus some of the key global players in consumption, in mobility, in finance, and in telecom. So it's really a revolution itself. And I have the luxury to have here with Rachel Gillum, who is Vice President for Ethical and Inclusive Product at the Office of Ethical and Human Use at Salesforce. And let me first start by admitting that how much I love the name of your title, Rachel, because you are mixing, you're putting together products and ethics. Because AI is not anymore a technical issue of the chief technology officers as the companies. It is, but not just of them. It's not just a social responsibility issue. It is, but not just for them. It's not just a regulatory issue, but it's really core business. And it's important that when companies redevelop the business, they do it from the beginning with ethics. You are one of the big tech leaders in the world. You are also one of the leaders on the ethical development and responsible and sustainable development of this amazing technology. So I wanted just to start with you. I mean, asking you how to share the journey of Salesforce. It's not just a 2 years journey. I know it's a longer journey. It's a deep journey. So how are you doing this path, taking this path, and how are you are seeing as a warm-up question the development of responsible AI from Salesforce, Rachel?
Yeah, thank you, Ángel. It's so great to be here and jump into this conversation. It's obviously something I care a tremendous amount about, and Salesforce has really been investing in this space for a long time. So as you mentioned, we've been working on AI and bringing AI to enterprise products for nearly a decade, but our office was formed a little over 5 years ago, and it was really driven from the very top of the company. The conversations around tech and its impact on society, there's a lot of difficult questions to be answered. And so we launched about 5 years ago, initially with just like an ethical use advisory council, which we still have today, but then formalized a central office. And so, as you mentioned, we are involved in the product design and development from the very beginning, as we conceptualize what we're building and why, the data that go into our models, to design elements and features that users engage with when we're using the technology, and then at the end, how folks are actually deploying the technology and forming policies around that. So it's from really beginning to end that we're involved in that process, again, driven by our top leadership. And the reason that this has been so important, especially as we turn to generative AI, and this has been our main focus, is that we found that in order for customers to really uptake and use the technology, they need to trust it. And we can get into this more, but right now, again, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of even pressure for CEOs and organizational leaders to start deploying AI and really reap the benefits of those efficiencies, but the trust hasn't caught up. And so that's a key focus of ours, is making sure that trust keeps up with the technology. We believe it's not enough just to deliver some capability, but we need to make sure that it's safe, that it's inclusive, that we're considering, again, the broader impact this technology has on society, and making sure that it's safe for everyone.
No, I mean, you touch a very core point, which is this issue of trust and trust of people. The more I read on from engineers developing AI, the more I think we have to work on trust and transparency, because they even admit that some models are running faster than they thought they were, and that the limits, they are not seeing even the limits of the potential. So it's important to trust, and for that reason, I think it's important the transparency and actually to give citizens concrete examples of why and how AI is really impacting and can impact for good the life. So that's where I wanted to go there to a down-to-earth question. As Murakami, one of my favorite writers and runner, used to say, I mean, what do we talk about when we talk about AI? So in concrete terms, I mean, from your company perspective, can you share some of the examples? I mean, working with the public sector or the private sector of these developments, because I truly believe that transparency is a key pillar for this trust that you highlighted so rightly so.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing a lot of research and conversation with our government customers, with private sector. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of excitement to jump in and utilize these tools in various aspects of work. And in fact, we're seeing that those who are using generative AI in their workflow are gaining a ton of efficiencies. They're already experiencing a huge boost in productivity. So that's great. So we are already seeing the value. But again, the top concerns that we're seeing, as you know, especially as governments, as enterprises are using it, again, are issues around data privacy, data security, accuracy, and as you mentioned, that issue of transparency, right? Until we know really what the system is doing and why, it's difficult to trust. And you know, a lot of those questions are coming out. You know, again, in our survey research, you know, over 50% of customers don't believe these models are safe and secure. And again, part of it, they can't see what's really going on. Over half believe that the outputs are probably inaccurate. Again, difficult to verify why they're getting the answers they're getting. And almost 60% just don't even trust the third-party companies with their data. And so that's really what we've been focusing on as we're trying to serve these customers. And what we've really been investing in is two key areas. So is the what we've called the trust layer, which is really helping differentiate, you know, and bring these consumer LLM models to enterprise, to government, to allow them to, again, trust and see what's going on, to bring that level of security and level of accuracy to their enterprise use cases. And part of that is, in that trust layer, is our audit trail. So it allows folks to get a bird's eye view of what's going on in their systems, understand why the system's doing what it's doing. And in our various design features, allow users to come in and really feel like they have control over the entire system at various aspects, not just waiting to the end to approve and say, go, you know, this is fine, but really giving them an opportunity throughout the whole system to lean in, to adjust, to making sure that the human is involved at the most critical junctures, the most critical points, as well as give them some transparency into what the system is doing. So for example, our tools allow basically cite the source, cite where they're pulling the data. So at any point the user wants to go in and to verify and check, they can do that. They can adjust, they can give feedback. So these are all pieces that we're doing to provide greater transparency, provide greater control, provide greater security, just because this is what we're hearing from customers and what they need. And again, in the various, and the use cases vary widely from, again, call centers and having automated responses to customers, to, you know, pulling different data and, you know, a broad data set for a government agency. There's a wide span of use cases, but in all cases, we want to bring those efficiencies, but really have clear human control, clear transparency, so we can start to build that trust over time.
It's very good, and being here at the Council of the Americas office in Washington D.C., walking distance to Capitol Hill, I will not avoid the regulation question, but in every time that in this type of conversation we get to regulation, we lose audience. So we'll keep that for later on. But I wanted to get deeper into this proactive path in which you are. As Randy mentioned at the beginning, I'm advising UNESCO on the work on AI and ethics with companies. And actually, the work that you and bodies are doing with companies is based on 3 or 4 principles. The first one is that good governance of AI is also good for business and for investment. Also, that companies, you are natural allies with regulators and with citizens, because there is nothing too complex not to be able to govern. I mean, we have governed hyper complex things already, and why not? We can govern AI. third is the proactivity. It's true that some things can be fixed, exposed, and we can, let's say, adapt and control, measure, and then react to the impacts. But some things cannot be done exposed. So an ex ante view is important. And actually, it's living by examples. Companies you are doing it already beyond the regulation that I insist will go there, but beyond the regulation, you are committing and you're taking the path. So how you are integrating this AI, ethical AI framework into your processes, and more specifically also, which are the challenges? Because you are one of the biggest and more relevant big tech companies, but there are some others, middle-sized, small-sized companies doing AI that also might learn also from the challenges that you have been facing in the recent past.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, because that's something we've had to really think about strategically. How do we make sure we're really touching different parts of the life cycle as these products are being developed? And we do that through a variety of ways. And because we really believe, and we've seen that it's so important that if you start this work at the beginning of the process versus waiting to the end right before you're launching a product or, deploying it, it's so much more cost effective. The design and the features work together so much better, again, if you're thinking about this from the very beginning. And so for us, we end up reaching out to our various product teams across the company. Oftentimes they'll reach out to us, and we will do assessments and workshops together as folks are designing new features and products to say, okay, this is what you're trying to build. This is what you want to achieve. Let's bring a diverse group of folks together to really stress test that, right? And think through what are some of the unintended consequences of what you're building? What are some safeguards and mitigations we can build in to protect against those? And so this is a workshop that we conduct over and over again with various teams across the company to make sure we're identifying those risks at the front end and coming up with really innovative solutions and mitigations. As I mentioned, we've really been leaning into this design element that we're calling human at the helm, again, where it's not just, where it's really focused on enabling the user, right? To help build that trust and enable the user to have that visibility into the system, right? And gain from those efficiencies. So that's a big focus of what we've been doing. I think the other piece, as you mentioned, and others who are in smaller organizations and want to start to do this work, there's really a business case for this. As I mentioned, our customers are asking for, there's not a lot of regulation, especially in the United States, around this work. There's a lot of conversations, but it's not there yet. But as you mentioned, we're not waiting for regulation. Our customers are demanding this. If they're going to use the products, they need to trust it and to know that we've done this work. And so that's been really driving our conversations, we believe, that advantage to really bringing folks into this space and helping them drive efficiencies in their work. So we've really seen a lot of success there, again, driven by our customers. And then as we're sharing with others, others don't need to wait for regulation to start practicing responsible AI today. And for smaller organizations, again, it starts, number one, with your data as you're looking to start your AI journey, right? Trusted AI starts with trusted data. A lot of organizations struggle, obviously, with data sort of dispersed everywhere in different systems. We have solutions that help bring that data together and then allow the AI to draw from your data, again, to make sure that it's pulling from accurate, reliable, trusted data in a secure way, and able to deploy it for your organization. But it does take, think about, your data, how it's set up, is it clean, your provenance journey. Also be mindful of how your vendors are using your data, right? Like for us, we commit to not training our models on our customers' data. In the trust layer, we've built in that security aspect to making sure that there's no data retention with the third-party models. As some people may or may not know, when they plug in information to the public-facing consumer models, those models take that data and they train on it, right? So it's really important for organizations not to be using these sort of public tools because they're sharing their private company data with a third party. So we've provided those protections to make sure folks can safely engage and take advantage of these powerful tools.
You you make very, very, very solid points. I trained some of these large language models back in the days, asking this model, is good AI sustainable and responsible AI good business, or it is a drag? No. And one of these large language models told me, no, it is not. It is really good business, because it's good for investors. Sooner or later, and I'm going to touch on this at the last part, sooner or later, investors are going to be evaluating ethical, responsible, sustainable AI in companies as they are evaluating right now the environmental footprint. This is going to happen because it's health. It's our mental health as our environmental health. It also says that also consumers are starting to will look at labels as we look at labels in clothes to make sure that they were rightly manufactured. Sooner or later, consumers and users of digital services, I'm pretty sure they will start looking into the nitty-gritty of how they were done, and hopefully made by humans would be like a quality label or at least controlled, supervised, and directed by humans is gonna be there. Also, it's good to retain talent. I mean, workers and engineers, very bright engineers. I mean, especially in the younger generations, as yours, Rachel, not mine, but as yours and the next ones. They don't work just for money. They work also for values, and I'm pretty sure they will start looking into that. So these are the pillars of this work. So we are seeing this revolution right now. This revolution is being let's say made able because we have a bunch of data, as you mentioned, because we have the skills working with this data and computer power. I mean, you touch a bit on data, but I wanted to come back to the skills part of not only of the workers, but also the users. I mean, how you are focusing on that, because obviously, both from an internal point of view, companies should start making sure that the users can use AI, because AI is going to boost productivity as not many technologies before, but also users. I mean, how to make sure that they don't do what many of us probably have done lately, which is to share information that we shouldn't in some of these open large language models.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I think some of the most exciting use cases of AI, when we talk about some of the positive efficiencies and something we've seen with some of our customers, for example, a customer, Gucci, shared about, how they've been deploying our generative AI in their call centers. And one of the really amazing things, and we've seen this in other academic research as well, is that the generative AI, when it's sort of generating responses for, call workers to respond to customers and sort of have that back and forth, it's really leveling up folks who are like entry level, little to no experience. It's bringing them up to the level of folks with like 10 years of experience. So it's really like bringing up the whole workforce. And I think we'll probably see opportunities across education, across different fields of work, folks that are, operating in their second language, right? Really help bring that level up to really level the playing field and drive that capability. So I think there's super exciting efficiencies coming there that are already here. So that's number one. But your question about like, how do we equip the users, right? So that's something we think a lot about. So from a broad lens, we do have a free online learning platform that teaches the basics of AI, responsible AI, how to develop prompts. So that's our Trailhead platform for anyone to use. So that's something we definitely point to. We're thinking about that digital divide. We're thinking about how do we sort of reskill and upskill folks. So that's what we offer the public, in addition to different accelerator programs for nonprofits that are doing this type of upskilling work, investing there. But on the product side, as I was mentioning, part of that trust building is also helping users know how to use the products more efficiently. So in certain areas, we really guide users to how to write effective prompts for the system so that they're not having to go back and forth to try to get a better answer. We kind of set them up so they're going to get the most out of the system as possible. We'll also, give some guidelines and sort of nudges when there might be something going wrong. So for example, if there's a high risk decision or use case, it'll prompt, again, the human to really lean in and to make an edit, to review, right? To making sure that they're not just going on autopilot, that they're really engaging with the system while still taking advantage of those efficiencies. So we sort of build the sort of either natural friction in certain areas or nudges in certain areas. Again, really trying to empower the user, but really trying to educate at the same time. And then, of course, we have certain guardrails and certain things that are built into the product. So I mentioned the trust layer. Part of that is also like a toxicity filter, which what it's doing is capturing, some of you have maybe heard these systems can spew out really terrible language and biased stuff, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, but basically we have a filter, again, especially for business and enterprise schools, that can kind of capture the worst of that, so that it's not being, spewed out to your employees or your customers. And so there's different, again, nudges and features that we're trying to empower the user and steer them towards responsible use.
I love that point, because I mean, thinking out loud, if the Council of Americas allows me, the impact that this new round of technology is having on the workforce is quite different from the past. No, we've seen robots, we've seen software, robots actually automating some, let's say, less skilled and more routine tasks. We've seen software many times substituting, let's say, high level tasks in some respects, but actually AI is substituting us, those who, as me, who thought, okay, my work and my brain is so creative that I'm gonna be all the time ahead of technology. Elon Musk said this is a matter of time since we are surpassed in many of the things. So actually, this is one of the technologies that can be equalizing, because as you said, for many, let's say, middle wage workers, this is a technology that is going to help them catch up with some of the gaps that they might have in terms of knowledge and access to information. So it's really good, that point, and actually this issue on the impact on the labor markets and the job and the workforce is one of the most promising ones. You did it, Rachel. You mentioned regulation 2 or 3 times. I come from regulation, so now is the time. I'm here at the Council of the Americas, walking distance to Capitol Hill. Thank you for the hospitality, by the way. And we have to address that question, especially because we have at the audience also some a very rich and crowded Latin American audience looking for answers. I mean, there are some different internets and some various visions on where should the governing and regulation of AI go. So what's the vision that you have from Salesforce on this journey that you are actually taking ahead and not waiting for some of these things to come? And what would you say to the Latin American audience that we have right now on that particular issue?
Well, glad to know you're having a great time in DC. I just missed you. I was just there the other day. Well, first of all, I'll say, again, all this is in motion. There's been a ton of conversation about this, as you well know. No one has the answers. So just to be clear on that, but we have seen a lot of momentum in this past year. And we've really welcomed that momentum, those steps forward between the EU AI Act, the White House executive order, to see some movement here. Happy to see that, because we will need some guardrails. As you mentioned, yes, we're leaning in. We're doing this already because it's business imperative for us, and we do believe others should lean in and do that. But regulatory guardrails will be part of this story. Generally speaking, again, we really support what we've seen so far, high, risk-based approaches to regulation, right? Not all, use cases and deployments are the same by any means. So those risk-based approaches we think is the right direction. Regulation that's going to distinguish between AI systems and models, right? The folks developing the models versus those deploying. We need to differentiate, right? Some nuance there. But I think most of all, we're really eager to see some foundational privacy regulation, because as we were talking about data, that is the foundation of any AI regulation, is privacy regulation. So you know, as you're looking around, that's really what we would like to see. But you know, as you mentioned, like, there's no telling exactly sort of what AI is going to become, what it's going to be capable of. It's important that we remain flexible, you know, on our part, you know, as we're addressing the guardrails and the challenges today in our product features and the ethical work that we're doing. And we really think that will help build the foundation and the infrastructure to help address sort of those unknown risks in the future. So I think it's going to be a combination of, again, regulation, best practices by companies. And for our part, you know, we've really tried to lean in and be a partner with governments in these conversations. Again, it's really tricky. It's really complex. So we're engaging in different, you know, bodies trying to think through this, helping setting standards with NIST there in Washington, D.C., setting the technical standards for these tools, leaning in on the President's Advisory Council, the National AI Advisory Council, as well as I participated in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's AI Commission, helping develop regulatory recommendations. So again, it's a you know, it's a complex area. But it's so important, as you started with the beginning of the conversation. This is going to impact so many economies, so many lives. So it's important that we get this right and that we really have a collaborative, thoughtful approach to it.
Lately, I've been in some of these debates on governing AI and relating AI, and I don't know what's the reaction of the crowd when I quote Ronald Reagan. But Ronald Reagan said, I mean, his view on governments were on many issues. It says when a government sees an activity that is moving fast, they tax it. They approve a tax. If then afterwards, if it keeps on moving, they will regulate it, that activity. And then when it stops moving, because there are so many taxes and regulation, they approve incentives. So I hope we are not following that, but I'm pretty sure we will not follow. And I'm not really such a fan on Ronald Reagan, let's say, doctrines. But it's important that we get it right, and as you mentioned, that also Latin America and the Caribbean has its own voice, and the maturity of let's say of AI systems in the region is not as it is in some other areas. It's not that Europe is a champion on AI; they are not yet, except some of big, let's say, good examples as Mistral in France. But it's important that obviously that Latin America and the Caribbean has its own vision and take the time to evaluate what is needed, because governing AI is not necessarily, and not just regulating AI, is investing in skills and people, as we spoke, is getting data, privacy, data security, the right. I will do a double click there with you right now. And it's also building the institutions, because now it's not, as in companies, it's not just a chief technology officer issue. In governments, is not anymore a Ministry of Telecommunications issue either. But let's go back to data. Let's go back to data. How you are seeing and how you are making sure at Salesforce that the data with which you are training your models is really complete, not biased, and actually also that the data that is used and users provide is used for good and in a transparent way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So starting with, you know, it starts like exactly making sure you have the right to use the data that you have. And so that's a foundational, you know, principle that we follow, making sure that we are able to use that data. So that's number one. Number two, we have an entire team that's fully dedicated to testing and trying to break our own models, right? And trying to, you know, push and test and anticipate what could go wrong and do that over and over. And again, this is not like a one-time exercise. This is like an ongoing, constant thing that we're doing. It's great job security for me, just because it is something that, and again, to deploy AI responsibly, there is an investment to be made there. And so we have that red teaming that we do. And then for our customers, again, their data is their most valued asset. And I sort of pointed to this a little bit. So in that trust layer that I mentioned, where, again, that's sort of like a sequence of gateways and retrieval mechanisms that enable, again, the customer to really utilize those third-party models. We have that secure data retrieval where, again, the customer is able to ground the model in their own data. Right. So the answers you're getting is actually relevant to you to really, again, build that efficiency, really pull and utilize your data in a really effective way with that dynamic grounding. And then when we send that information to the third party, we do data masking. So we're protecting that private and sensitive information. It never goes to the third party. And then even what does go to the third party, we have a zero data retention policy with those partners so that nothing is retained. It's not retrained. And then again, when it comes back to the customer, it's been screened by our toxicity filter and, has been demasked, and so that's useful to use. So it's really helping utilize all this data a lot of organizations have but can't use in a safe and secure way. So that's really what we're trying to offer. Then, as I mentioned, the audit trail to really be able to observe what's gone on, go back if there's been a challenge or a problem or something, a question, you can go back and see exactly what's been happening through your systems. And so that's our approach. Again, data really being central in our commitment to not, utilizing our customers' data in any way to train our models. Customers' data is customers' data. It's not our data.
Very good point. And actually, along your narrative, you touched data rules and data, let's say, policies inside the company. You have touched also the skilling and reskilling, upskilling of all Salesforce staff, and also, institutions inside the company as your office. They are exactly the same three pillars that governments are thinking about: how to regulate the use of data, how to train the public servants, and also how to organize the governments themselves. So I think that's why this public-private dialogue is so important, because some of the governments may say, okay, there are things in which we are similar, there are things that we differ, but these are the same pillars in order to develop a responsible and ethical AI, both for a commercial and product-oriented goal, or for the benefit of our citizens. And here, let me do just a very short commercial of UNESCO, if you allow me, because it's work also that we are doing with Salesforce. Is actually a disclosure mechanism from companies, just stressing what you just said. Because some of the big tech companies, some of the telco companies, but also some companies on banking are actually doing a lot of tests and a lot of processes before launching a product, before launching a service, in order to make sure that this get out really well. And this is the disclosure mechanism that I think sooner or later investors are going to be starting to look at and say, okay, this is a company that is doing the right thing. Consumers are going to be starting to look at our labels in our clothes, and also obviously workers who decide where to work and where not to work. So it's really good, and I'm pretty sure the ranking of Salesforce is gonna be good. Listen to you, Rachel, and all your writing. Let me close here. I think we have just 1 minute before going to the Q&A, and then the Ministry Etcheverry. With a personal commitment or a personal note, why, Rachel, are you working on these issues, and where do you see us in 6 months' time? After all this momentum that we identified, both on the sector side, on the regulation side, because I have to admit, I work this for my daughter, for my 3-year-old daughter. I'm a totally techno-optimistic, but I want to make sure that she works and lives in a world where AI is a force of good, and that she benefits from also disconnection from time to time, but more specifically from AI for good. So, what's your personal, motivation that I think it's can also inspire some others in this conversation?
Yeah, no, like my why, just like you, and going back to the beginning, this technology is super exciting, so much potential, right? In health, in science, in education, right? It's going to impact so many folks. And so making sure that we're steering that impact, making sure it's for good. We're not waiting and just waiting for disasters to happen. We're leaning in at the front end. And so that's my why. I want to contribute to that. This is going to be so impactful. And really in the enterprise space, many folks may not think about it, but this is where a lot of folks will be initially interacting with AI because we're enabling so many businesses to start to deploy it. So it's really high impact. And then the other piece is I really think it's important to have diverse voices at the table as we're developing this AI to make sure that we're thinking about the different types of communities that's going to serve the different type of regions. And so that's something we also intentionally bring in is lots of diverse voices to making sure we're considering not just, a US-centric certain demographic approach, but we're really taking a broader lens. And so that's my why. And again, I'm really optimistic about where we'll go. Again, we don't know everything AI is going to become, even in 6 months, right? Just watching the last 18 months of how much it's changed, it's really hard to predict exactly where we'll be. But I really believe if, again, we do the investment now, address the issues that we see and know now, we'll be in a better position to address, again, some of the unknowns moving forward. So.
No, thank you, Rachel. I have my AI-powered notes here. I learned much more than I think I gave, but it was great to have you, and I'm optimistic as well. But we have to be proactive, and I'm pretty sure with these public-private initiatives that the Council of Americas is pushing forward, we'll get there. Randy, it was a pleasure to be here, and the floor and the screen is yours.
Thank you, Ángel and Rachel, for such an inspiring and thought-provoking conversation. Lots of optimism, but lots of care also. So much to comment on. Before we open the floor for comments from the audience, I want to give a very special welcome to our keynote speaker, Aisen Etcheverry, Minister of Science, Technology, Knowledge, and Innovation of Chile. Minister Etcheverry, the floor is yours, and thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to be with us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Ángel, and thank you to the Council of the Americas and Salesforce for organizing this meeting. It's actually a pleasure to be here and to be able to share with you the many things that are happening in Chile with regards to artificial intelligence. I was looking into my notes and trying to organize the way I was going to address such an interesting and complex subject. And I realized that in the case of Chile, this looks a lot like a puzzle with different pieces that we have been building over time and that are coming all together probably during this year with some results that have us really happy and looking forward to the future. So let me start by telling you a little bit of the story on how we got to where we are in Chile when it comes to artificial intelligence. I think that path and that history tells a lot about the different challenges and the complex decisions that countries are making, but also I'm also a techno-optimistic and therefore also tells us a little bit about how the future is shaping for our country. Artificial intelligence is not a new subject for us. Chile has had over the years a very committed and strong policy around digital technologies as a whole. On the side of the infrastructure, we are a highly connected country. We have a lot of investment on digital infrastructure. The data centers from the main big, large companies are based in Chile, and we have connectivity cables all over the world. We recently launched with President Boric the construction of one cable that is going to go from Chile to Australia, being the first cable that is going to connect south to south through the Pacific, and therefore enhance resilience and connectivity, which are essential for any digital technology. But it's not only the infrastructure. Over the years, we have trained our people. We have strong universities where electrical engineering, computing engineering, data sciences are being formed. We have PhD programs, we have research centers, and many people that have been thinking about how digital technologies can be developed and be used for the benefit of the people as a whole. And then at the government level, Chile has a very long tradition of digitalizing government. We have worked over the years in providing digital services to our citizens, and even though there's a lot of space to grow, of course, and things to improve, we have a highly digitalized government as well. So when the challenges of artificial intelligence became more obvious, and that this happened a couple of years ago, through the commitment of the government back then, but also from our parliament and the legislative branch, particularly through the Commission of the Future, which is a group of senators that are working on these issues permanently, a commission was formed to elaborate the first artificial intelligence strategy for the country. And this was way before ChatGPT, way before LLMs, way before the big bust we are seeing now on artificial intelligence. So back in 2020, we already had our first artificial intelligence strategy that was built on top of all these blocks that we had developed over the years. And for that strategy, if you look at it from the lenses of today, I think there are many things that are quite remarkable. We put a lot of emphasis on creating capacities, on training more people, on strengthening our infrastructure. And also, we started discussing about some of the ethical and responsibility issues, but from the perspective of 2020, right? Before the world changed with the LLMs and the ChatGPTs. And mainly because of that strategy, but also because of the political commitment on the government side and on the legislative side, we managed to take all these capacities we had and made them even better. So for a couple of years now, we have been giving scholarships to Chileans to go all over the world to study artificial intelligence. We developed and we funded a research center specifically on artificial intelligence, and other smaller centers on artificial intelligence are looking at it from the social sciences perspective and from the humanities perspectives as well. And all these capacities that were built over the past 3 years took us to 2023 or 2022. And then when ChatGPT came, I was recently appointed Ministry of Science. And I always say this, but I was extremely fortunate because I had to face this challenge, right? What is a country like Chile going to do with artificial intelligence? And instead of just running in circles and being extremely scared, I had a very capable and committed group of people in the academia, in the government, in the legislative power, and also at the company level and on the private sector that had already thought about many of these issues, that had already the capacities and were able to engage in a discussion that became a nationwide discussion that would allow us to generate a position as a country on what we had to do to basically promote the development of artificial intelligence, do it in a way where citizens and the Chilean people are at the center and for the benefit of the people, and also making sure that we could cover all the risks that we know are there and also face many of the fears that our population has. So to do that, we used the different tools we had. We took the artificial intelligence strategy, and we looked at it. We convened the same group of experts that helped us in the first version of it, and we decided that it was a good strategy that needed to remain over time, but there were some issues related to the ethical use and responsible use of artificial intelligence that had changed, so we needed to update that. Then we looked at the international sphere, and of course, we were part of UNESCO. We were following what UNESCO was doing with the ethical principles for the development of artificial intelligence, and we really fast learned about the ready assessment model. So we took the challenge of implementing the RAM in Chile, and we were the first country, I believe, in the world, maybe Ángel can correct me, to actually go through the process and do an assessment of the country to understand where we stand at, where we had spaces to grow, where were the things that we needed to correct in order to have everything that was needed for the full and responsible development of artificial intelligence. And that was a process that was developed during 2023. It became a national discussion. We were able to have groups of people from different backgrounds in every region of the country discussing about artificial intelligence. And in parallel, we updated our national strategy. It went through a public consultation, and we are at 2 or 3 weeks from its new launching with everything that was incorporated, that it's mainly based on the work that UNESCO has been doing over time. But that was not just it. We said we need more. We need more than a strategy. So we moved into 3 different things. First of all, we decided that it was not something that Chile could do alone. We needed to convene and to involve the different countries of Latin America and the Caribbean to better understand what the challenges of the regions were and how we could, as a region, also participate in the global discussion. And that process has been extremely interesting. And one of the things that I think became really clear to me, at least, and to our country, is that there are challenges that are common, and there's an ethical use of AI, not in the particular application of AI, but on the way we build a framework for the development of AI worldwide. And that framework needs to take into account the digital divide and how this technology can just enlarge the digital divide. And that digital divide is not only important for the people that are left behind, but it's also important for the people that are using AI. Because if we're relying on these models to build public policies, if we're relying on these models to better understand climate change, or to better understand how the world works, or how we're going to develop our industry, there are large parts of the population of the territories that are not contributing with data. And Rachel was talking about data just a couple of minutes ago. If the data is not good, then the results are not good. If the data is not complete, and if the data does not take into account all the territories and all the people, then what we are going to be building is our models and our conclusions are completely missing large parts of who we are as humanity. And that became really obvious in the discussion with the Latin American countries and the Caribbean. We created a working group that has been working since October last year. We managed to put together a declaration, the Santiago Declaration on Ethical Use of Artificial Intelligence, and many of the countries of the region, including Chile, are using that as the framework for our own regulations and for our own approach to artificial intelligence. So that at an international level. At the national level, in January this year, we considered it was important to give a first step into regulation, and we created something similar to an executive order. That's not the name we use in Chile, but it's something like that. To basically govern the way artificial intelligence is used by government agencies. We incorporated in that piece of regulation transparency criteria, responsibility criteria, participation criteria, but also we encourage government agencies to use artificial intelligence, but to use it when it's needed. This is not a toy. It's something that you need to make sure that you need it and then you use it. It's not just for the fun, right? And through that implementation, we have seen some interesting things. We have now accounted for at least 100 different algorithms on artificial intelligence that are being used in the Chilean government. We have a little bit more of 100. We're using them in the healthcare system. We're using them for safety matters. We're using it for the prevention of fraud. We're using it in social services to get to the people that are, again, left behind and identify them, and so on. And it has proven to be an extremely useful tool to provide better service to our citizens as well. And then the final piece is legislation itself. We have been working on a draft legislation that is going to be presented to Congress fairly soon. It's been an interesting process. We drafted that legislation at the same time of the European Union having their discussions and their implementation. But also, and again, going back to the beginning of the story, we did it in parallel, the executive branch with the legislative branch. And the same group that helped the government to create the first strategy had meetings with experts all over the world, all over Chile, and they created their own set of recommendations that were taken by the government, the executive branch, to create our own piece of legislation that we're going to present to Congress back probably by the end of this month or the beginning of the next. And I highlight that process because I think it's really interesting from a cultural perspective, how a country like ours, and this is something at least I'm very proud of, has managed to have policies around digital technologies that go from one government to another, even though we change the political color of the government. It has also managed to create policies that involve the executive branch and the legislative branch with views that are similar, or where discussion at least is possible, and we can move forward through time in the implementation of these areas. But also, it has become a cultural matter, societally, right? It's not just at the government level, but it's also for societies as a whole. And we see that in the way citizens are, for example, participating in the public consultation for the renewal of our artificial intelligence strategy. We see it with initiatives such as Congreso del Futuro, which is this big event we do every year in January, where scientists from all over the world come to Chile, and we have activities and talks and workshops and so on. And the entire Chilean population is involved, and this year we talked about artificial intelligence during that space. And you see it even at schools, right? You go to schools where you have teenagers or kids, and they're asking questions and trying to understand how artificial intelligence can work for them. And I wanted to finish my short intervention with this aspect, right? Because I guess there are two questions, at least for us, that remain extremely open. One is how we're going to move forward as a society, not only in Chile, but in our international collaborations as well, in regulations that are actually capable of regulating artificial intelligence. We're all moving towards risk-based models. We're all talking about better understanding AI algorithms, but it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of capacities that not all governments have for that. So if we don't manage to create regulations that are interoperable among countries and agencies that are capable of doing that that checking that is required for the risk-based approach in a way that is interoperable among agencies, it's going to be really, really hard for most of us, right? And that's a question that it's still open. We are looking with high optimism to what could happen in the Conference of the Future at United Nations. But I think there are many, many questions that are still open on that area that we need to address fast and do it in a way that is collaborative. And then the second big question is how we prepare our citizens in a world where artificial intelligence is going to be more and more present every time, right? And it's not just about understanding the technology, it's not just about programming, or it's not just about understanding the role of data, but it's mainly, I believe, about critical thinking and about how we empower from the very little kids to the older citizens that are not digital natives, how we empower them and we give them back the ability to challenge what they see, to question what they read, and to be protagonists, that's the word, protagonists, and not just receptors of what artificial intelligence can provide. And I think that's the toughest question. And it's one that I believe at least should take a large space of the discussions we are having. Just to finish, Chile has a strong commitment on artificial intelligence. It's one of the priorities of our president. It was part even of his intervention at the United Nations General Assembly last year. But the way we see this developing is in public-private collaboration, it's in international collaboration, and it's through the empowering of citizens all over the world without making that digital divide deeper. And that's very hard to do. So I have a lot of work, I have to say. So thank you so much for listening. And I'm not sure if there's going to be space for questions, but happy to take them if there's any doubt or you need me to go deeper on any of the subjects I touched.
Thank you, Minister Aisen. We do have 15 minutes for questions, and I've come away from this feeling extremely optimistic. Chile is definitely in good hands, and you're steering us all in the right direction, because there's so many people who are so afraid of artificial intelligence, but the point about critical thinking is important. We have to question. There's a new book that I read recently called Co-Intelligence, so we've got to that's a fascinating topic. Let's make sure that we use artificial intelligence and not just be lazy and rely on it. Diego Basante, you were the first to raise your hand, so please turn on your camera, ask your question, and Guido, then we'll go over to you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I do have a question for Minister Etcheverry, also thanking you for your keynote, very interesting. So my name is Diego Basante. I lead the government affairs team for IBM in Latin America. Minister, I believe you've met with our director in Chile, Manuel O'Brien, who's also on the call, by the way. I would like to ask you, based on your experience, on the balance that you keep, or that I would expect that you need to keep, between two different forces or two different expectations. On the one hand, and you've talked about this extensively, we would like to have some level of international collaboration, right? The Santiago Declaration shows that, we ideally would like to be in a world with a minimum level of standardization in AI regulation in Latin America. Now, on the other hand, none of our countries in the region want to be countries of second order or third order that simply adopt the regulation that is written elsewhere. So that second force is the sovereignty, right? So my question to you is, how do you balance the expectation to collaborate internationally with the expectation to maintain a certain level of sovereignty? I suspect that sovereignty goes beyond just national pride and there really is an impact for citizens in a country that is able to maintain a level of sovereignty in its regulations. But when you come to the practical matter, I suppose that there is a certain limit until which a country can wait for international standards before moving on its own, or should collaboration be sought at all costs. So basically, Madam Minister, I think that we would all benefit from your insights on this conversation between sovereignty and international collaboration for Latin American countries as we tackle AI regulation. That's my question for you. Thank you very much.
Should I respond right away, or do you want to take many and then you tell me, Ángel? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, why don't we take the question from Guido also, and then we'll go on. And if you could all keep your questions short. I'm malcriadita because we have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Hola, Guido.
No, yo no tengo una pregunta, yo tengo un comentario. Yo represento al Congreso Futuro, que trabajamos en Chile, que une a todas las universidades chilenas, públicas y privadas, al Senado, a la Cámara de Diputados y a los territorios, a la sociedad civil, al mundo empresarial y al gobierno. Y somos que elaboramos la política de estrategia de inteligencia artificial con todas las universidades chilenas y trabajamos colaborativamente hoy día con la ministra y lo hicimos con los ministros del presidente Piñera. Nosotros tenemos una preocupación. Yo no soy optimista, porque creo que estamos viviendo un mundo donde la inteligencia artificial tiene una captura. Tenemos dos grandes desafíos. Un desafío ético, porque estamos llegando a un mundo que tenemos que decidir cuántas capacidades, de nuestras capacidades fundamentales, humanas, intelectuales, creativas, emocionales, queremos traspasarle a la máquina. Cada vez estamos perdiendo más competencia y la máquina se hace más humana y nosotros más binarios. Estamos teniendo severos problemas de adicciones, de pérdida de la capacidad de conversación, de pérdida del pensamiento profundo. Esto no tiene nada que ver con las potencialidades que tiene la inteligencia artificial, porque tiene gigantescas, pero también tiene riesgos existenciales. Y un segundo tema que es político. Vamos a seguir viviendo en un mundo propietario, hay una apropiación del futuro. Sí, aquí este es un tema geopolítico fundamental, donde la inteligencia artificial está en pocas manos, está en Silicon Valley, ni siquiera en Estados Unidos, que están decidiendo el futuro de la humanidad, están diseñando el futuro, son ellos los que van a Marte, que generan las tecnologías, que generan GPT, que generan metaverso, y por el otro lado está China. Aquí hay un duopolio donde nos están obligando a ser vasallos de uno o de otro. Por eso que con Rafael Yuste nosotros planteamos esta idea de hacer una ley de neuroderecho que hicimos en Chile, que es un nuevo derecho humano. ¿Por qué un nuevo derecho humano? Porque lo que hay que defender es el humanismo, hay que defender a Homo sapiens, porque estamos viviendo un tiempo donde Homo sapiens puede estar llegando a su fin y ser un reemplazo por un poshumano, por un cyborg, como lo están planteando los transhumanistas, que son Google, que son Facebook. Y por lo tanto nosotros necesitamos aquí tomar una decisión. Esto no lo tuvo Homo habilis ni Homo erectus, no pudieron decidir, pero nosotros, Homo sapiens, sí podemos decidir si queremos continuar a un cambio evolutivo o no. Y lo segundo es un gran tema político, de democratizar el futuro, porque está capturado el futuro. Además, nosotros, frente al tema de Elon Musk, con Rafael y usted elaboramos una propuesta de regulación de las neurotecnologías directas, asimilando las neurotecnologías directas a dispositivos médicos, ¿no? Que tengan que tener un registro en tu salud pública, que tengan que tener un sistema de acreditación, que tengan que establecer sus usos, sus efectos adversos.
Guido, disculpa que te corte. Guido,
Sí.
disculpa que te corte, pero tenemos que ir avanzando con la otra pregunta. Creo que entendemos tu punto de vista. Aline, do you want to ask your question? Y disculpa, después podemos
Mira,
seguir la conversación, pero agradecida.
Lo último, yo no soy optimista, creo que hay que tener esperanza que podamos cambiar esto. El optimismo de decir, mira, sigamos como vamos, yo creo que eso es un error. A esperanza podemos cambiar
Entendemos
esto.
perfectamente tu punto, Guido. Aline, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I am Aline McQueen from Brazil, and I work at the Brazilian Federal Data Processing Service. I want to congratulate the speakers, and I have a question for Rachel and another for the minister. The question is about the topic of transparency. How does Salesforce deal with the opaque algorithms? Do you choose more transparent algorithms or are you developing new ones? Is partial transparency of AI systems enough? And for the minister, in your opinion, should systems developed by the government always adopt more transparent algorithms? How to balance the accuracy of opaque algorithms with the duty of transparency of AI systems? Thank you very much.
So does Salesforce want to answer first and then Aisen? Because there were two questions, right?
Yeah, I'll quickly just say a few words and then hand it over to the minister. But yes, so transparency is a huge question. Again, folks really worried about accuracy, if there's proper representation, concerns about bias. As the minister talked about, if you don't have a representative data set, how do we know sort of what these outputs are? So again, a lot of that starts at the beginning, making sure we're, again, have the right to use that data. We're mindful that we're using quality data. It's representative, right? So it really starts with that quality there. As far as what we're developing so far, we have a variety of models that we're developing. What's available now is our code generation models, for example. And then even as we integrate third-party models, what we do is we test them very rigorously, right? So to understand what the system is doing and to make adjustments and tweaks there. So it's really about, again, quality data, really testing the models to understand the outputs they're giving. If there is bias in certain areas, really adjust for that and account for that. And then as far as the system goes, as I mentioned, basically giving transparency through various parts of the process. Most importantly, our audit trail, which is part of our trust layer, again, that basically keeps track of every single decision, every single recommendation that the system has made, every prompt, so that as from a governance standpoint, an administrator can go back and look and understand exactly what's happened, so they can verify, assess, give feedback if something seems not to be working as expected, right? To be able to go back and see what's happened. So it's not just, again, what you see, the output, you can really go back and understand. So I'll stop there and hand it over to the minister.
Thank you. And thank you for the questions. Basically, they touch on three huge subjects, sovereignty, humanity, and transparency, right? Which are at the core of the challenges that of course, AI face. So let me briefly touch on the three of those. On sovereignty, sovereignty is not just about the regulation. You can have a very sovereign and particular and specific regulation to your country, but if you don't have the capacities, if you don't have the computing capacities and the private sector and the academia doing things, then it's not really sovereignty, right? You have to look at, I believe, in a much complex way. And I think part of what Gil was touching on his intervention goes towards that idea of sovereignty as well. We need to understand the sovereignty of countries when it comes to technology and regulation, and to technology and artificial intelligence in particular, not just on how we are going to regulate, on how we're going to allow for this app or the other app or this company to come to our countries, but how we can have everything that is needed to actually develop and deploy artificial intelligence that accounts for the specificities of our countries. And that's even harder because writing regulations is not easy, but then creating capacities is much, much harder. And that's why I think it's so important what was done with the first AI strategy. And that's why it's so important to have people researching and thinking about this, and startups using it, and companies being built around artificial intelligence. Because I think there's a big truth on what Gil was saying. This is being developed by big companies that come from specific countries. And of course, that create a risk that needs to be taken into account by countries like ours on what does that mean and how you create policies that can somehow give back a little bit of that sovereignty that might be loose. But it's not just the regulation, it's also the capacities. And I think it's important to not forget that. Now, how you do it, it's probably the hardest part. In the case of Chile, we have some very large experience when it comes to free trade agreements, which is a way of creating also regulation in a way that it's collaboratively internationally, but can provide some spaces for the specificities of the different countries. It has its own challenges, we all know, but it's an experience that the country has that, of course, we're taking into account around this. There's also the challenge on how you regulate on something that is changing so fast. Specifically for a civil law country like ours, regulations tend to be rigid and to remain for many, many years. And when you talk about technology that changes not every 6 months, but every week, basically, a regulation that can adapt to that, it's really hard. And there are models that I think are interesting. In the case of Chile, we are looking into creating a council of experts that can provide for constant updating of the different regulations, which is a way to keep your regulation active. There are sandboxes. I mean, there's different tools that I think all countries should be looking at and really creating capacities to regulate in a way that is much more flexible and can be adapted to the development of the technology as well. On the humanity and how we safeguard what is human, I think that's probably the hardest question, right? And it was part of many of the discussions we had at Congreso El Futuro this year. I don't have an answer for that. I do rely a lot on what education can do. I do think that when you have countries really putting people at the center of what they do and trying to create capacities and to understand technology in a way where human rights are before the development of the technology, and the work that was done by Guido and Rafael Yuste in the Congress with neural rights regulation, it's a big step forward in that direction. But like I said in my intervention, creating the technology is not the hardest part, and having the models, I don't think is the hardest part, or creating the regulations is not the hardest part. The hardest part is how we make sure that critical thinking is there, how we train people, how we create a culture where we don't rely and give away what makes us human, but rather than that, we use technology as a tool, which is and it should remain, right? And again, I don't have the answer for that. I just have questions. But I guess we should be discussing much more of that for sure. And then on transparency, again, it's super hard question as well. From the regulatory side, but also from the developing side. The way we are addressing it is separating the different layers. There's transparency on the data that is being used, and that follows certain criteria. There's transparency on the algorithm itself, and that follows another set of criteria. There's transparency on the outcome and how you can provide information for the person that, for example, is subject of the reception of a social benefit. How can that person understand the process behind the decision-making, and how through that understanding the process can use all their citizen rights and human rights and complain if there's any to complain, or if there's I need to challenge the decision to be able to do that. But and this takes me back to the difficulty of the regulation side, because it's really easy to say we want AI to be transparent, But then when you really need to understand AI models and how they work and how they're going to be built, and to provide for regulation on the different layers of the technology to actually achieve the result you want to get to. And that's really hard to do. So I guess the questions are just an example on how complicated this all is, and how important it is to have discussions at the highest level, but also at the citizen as a whole and at the academia and everywhere to actually understand better these different things. I see many researchers and people from Chile connected that could answer these questions so much better than I do, not just Guido, but Juan Velázquez and Martín Tironi, many of who were the experts behind our strategy. So I'm sorry, Ranjit, but if any of you want to jump in and complement anything that I just talked, please do, because you are much more experts and have helped us a lot in building all this. So you can probably give even better answers than I have done.
Go right ahead. If anybody wants to say some final comments to complement what the minister has said, just let me know. Raise your hand and jump in. Todos muy calladitos. Oh,
Presenté bien, quizás.
everybody's very shy today. So if there are no other comments, I would like to thank Minister Etcheverry, because you have been incredibly generous with your time, but also to give us an overview of your journey, and also to be in a position to answer all of these difficult questions that you are asking yourself about the future of this and how we can harness this capability but not lose our humanity, because governments all over the world talk about well-being, bienestar. So how can we use artificial intelligence for bienestar all over the world? But they're difficult questions. I know we can have more conversations on this. Rachel, thank you for your time and all of the hard work that you're doing. Ángel, thank you for being on this program also. And to Salesforce, muchísimas gracias, obrigada. We cannot do this work without you. We look forward to the next program. And if anybody on the call has ideas, please feel free to reach out to us and let us know, because we're going to be doing a lot more programs on this topic. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.